Okay, here we go again. This is now part 2 of Mankind, the Child of the Stars by Max H. Flint and Otto O. Binder. We're still in chapter 1. This will be part 2 of it. Evolutionary Clues. It may be instructive now to review Darwin's theories of evolution, and see where it fails to cover the many anomalies that block the way in discovering the origin of man on Earth. We believe the failure hinges on man's development alone, and that it is possible to show that in the past 500,000 years or more, they should put these numbers in quotes. Man continually gave strong evidence of being a hybrid rather than a strict evolutionary product. Man has been the only animal on Earth that showed dramatic biological and evolutionary development in the last 500,000 years, even though we have no evidence for the 500,000 years part. Even in the past 50,000 years, that'd be more accurate. It is strange that this occurred only to man. Couldn't it far more logically have been hybridization instead of normal evolutionary development? Let us go back to time when Charles Darwin was at last reading the publish. The print is small, so last ready to publish his revolutionary theory of evolution. It was the year 1858. He received a letter from his friend Alfred R. Wallace, who was in the East Indies. This letter may have been a devastating blow to Darwin. In it, Wallace stated that he had developed a far long thought and observation, a theory of evolution that had the concept of natural selection as the central theme. By himself, Wallace had discovered the grand concept that Darwin felt was his own singular contribution to science. In deference to Wallace, Darwin concluded that the only proper thing to do was to withdraw his own paper so that Wallace would get credit for the original discovery. Darwin apparently had an essentially sterling character. I don't know about that one. I think we know a lot more about the man. His friends were upset at what they considered to be a self-imposed marriage of justice, and they prevailed upon Darwin to change his mind. The problem was finally solved by having Darwin and Wallace present their papers at the same meeting in Linnean Society of London. They were then published together in the Society Transactions for 1858. But subsequently and gradually, for various reasons, Darwin was credited as the father of evolution. Darwin and Wallace remained good friends throughout their lives. Wallace consistently maintained that Darwin was the originator and the most able champion of the theory of evolution. There is no doubt, however, that Wallace conceived of a grand theory independently of Darwin and denied any claim upon it simply out of regard for his friend. Plus, we're talking about politics and the Fabian Society, and around, they gotta work together and control the Anglo-American establishment, right? Is one aspect of this strange tale of friendship between these two gifted men that bears directly upon our argument that man may be a hybrid. Darwin believed that man, like all other animals, was a product of natural evolution. Wallace, however, finally concluded that man was an exception to the orderly operation of biological laws. This is one of the things you need to do when you have empires. You got to convince your attack dogs that what they're doing is okay because they're dealing with mere animals instead of human beings. The principle of natural selection, or its corollary, survival of the fittest, did not fit mankind. These words have thunderous implications now. Here were two intellectual giants who simultaneously developed one of the greatest theories in scientific history. Yet one of these two men believed that human beings were an exception to the rule that all living things developed by means of natural selection. Survival of the fittest from the lower forms of life. How did Wallace conceive that man was an exception to the rule of evolution? Did his arguments leave room for the concept advanced within his book that man may be an Earthman/Starman hybrid? Very definitely, for one of Wallace's explosive statements was, quote, that some intelligent power had guided or determined the development of man, end quote. Now, this is not only about God and belief in God, it's also about the sacredness of human life. And when you have empires and you want to call the herd, you got to justify what you're doing, right? The other people are just subhuman. They're not as intelligent as you. You're much more superior. We're all just animals after all, right? That's why it's so important. Either he meant God and his divine power, or he was thinking of an unknown force, which leaves it wide open that something influenced mankind's evolution, and that something could very well be the starmen. One very important fact must be pointed out before we proceed. Though having doubts himself, Darwin decided not to go along with Wallace and the latter's belief that man represented a departure from the laws of natural selection. As Darwin gradually assumed the great credit for his survival of the fittest concept, he also assumed a great burden of attempting to prove to the world that his theory was correct, inviolable, and without fault or exception. So inviolable, without fault and exception. This burden inevitably caused Darwin to lose some scientific objectivity. He became a champion instead of a scientist. He campaigned one of the greatest and most disturbing concepts since the birth of Christ, and he fully appreciated the importance of his role. Small wonder, then, that he chose to ignore many ways in which man himself deviated from the otherwise perfect workings of the great theory. In bypassing the anomaly of man by proving less than perfect explanations based solely upon his theory, Darwin was able to convince large segments of the scientific community that his theory was by and large correct. But actually he was not at all at ease with the explanations that he had devised to explain some of man's deviations from the rules that obviously did govern all the rest of the animal kingdom? That's a big question mark right there for me. For instance, he was at a complete loss to come up with a truly satisfactory answer to the amazing phenomena of why man alone is relatively hairless. Just as it is true that Darwin lost scientific objectivity by assuming the burden of champion, it is also true that Wallace was thereby given the role of using ultimate objectivity. He had nothing to prove to the world, and consequently could be, if anything, more objective than before. So Wallace, the naturalist, was able to analyze the available data more searchingly and dispassionately than Darwin. He was able to take the first hesitant, if unknowing, step towards the concept, rather shocking at first glance, that is being proposed in this book. Wallace noted some strange facts about man that caused him to conclude man was a contrary exception to the classic working of the law of evolution. In an alarming number of ways, man's great brain and mind, for instance, did not fit into the laws of natural selection. Nowhere in the animal kingdom was there to be found anything like the quality of mathematical and scientific capabilities of the human race. Moreover, nothing could be found in the environment of man that could, by the inexorable laws of the natural selection, produce any sort of genius in any individual. Wallace put it down in black and white. Quote, nature never overendows a species. Okay, so nature never overendows a species beyond the demands of the everyday existence. Certainly, genius couldn't be the result of the demands of everyday existence. Further, Wallace knew that man had desires and esoteric yearnings that were never observed in the minds and behaviors of other animals. The most revealing is man's need for religion, a need to feel that he is not alone but part of a larger, more important order in the plans of a creator. This order assures man that he and he alone has connections, what might be called, quote, cosmic connections, end quote, with God or lesser gods of the vast universe. There is nothing in the human environment that could cause man, by natural selection, to develop in such a way that a need for religion would be natural. If anything, man has less need than any other animal to devise religion. Man is dominant over all other animals. He is king of all he surveys. Why is it, then, that he feels a need to be assured that he was and is part of some much greater scheme of things, all of divine origin? Wallace knew these things, and he also knew that man had a greater gross brain weight than any other animal except the dolphin, elephant, and whale. He felt sure that man was an exception to the rule that all living things grew from one primal living cell. Wallace may also have known that man is the only primate that cries emotional tears. in small things, but still a great barrier, a small thing, but a great barrier when no explanation for this odd and irreconcilable fact could be derived from the principles of natural selection. He knew, too, that the unbelievability of advanced cultures of the ancient Samaritans and Egyptians had sprung up overnight, apparently without cause, certainly without counterpart in the natural or primate world. Wallace knew that the laws of natural selection could not explain the sudden explosion of those ancient cultures, without also insisting that the cultural advance should go forward. This had not happened, and Wallace knew that the failure of cultural advance to continue to new heights was of great importance in the story of mankind. Does Wallace's belief surprise you? Namely, that mankind has not really progressed except technologically since the earliest civilized times. Outside of arrogant and egotistic scientists, among the establishment leaders of today, many sober scholars and thinkers see undeniable evidence that all the basic rules of ethics, morals, philosophy, social nature, religion, everything important to mankind as a whole were laid down long ago, starting with the Samaritans around 10,000 BC. Peaks of human thought were already reached in BC times, particularly in Greece and Rome. We will see in a later chapter that there is a strong evidence for believing that there were more geniuses per capita in ancient times than today. The advent of modern science and technology has not changed or advanced the fundamental rules and precepts of human nature in human society, no matter how much we would like to think ourselves superior to our ancestors. Will anybody deny that there is much unrest in the current world, much searching for souls and dissatisfaction, doubt, and uncertainty over what the meaning of life is? We are really less secure today than the well-enlightened people of certain BC eras. Our vaunted advancement is largely illusory, based on pure materialism. Wallace knew that there was a logical explanation for the cessation of forward movement in human affairs, and that without doubt man was therefore an exception to the otherwise universal law of natural selection and its relentless drive for improvement in all creatures. This great man, freed as he was from the responsibility of proving the evolutionary theory to be correct, could dispassionately and analyze the available facts. He came to the inescapable conclusion that man was not the result of natural selection but by itself, but was the result of natural selection plus some other unknown variable. That unknown variable which we propose will solve the mysteries that plague Wallace and even Darwin, is the concept that man is a hybrid and Earth a colony of starmen. During the past 500,000 years, man has particularly given evidence that he is a hybrid of only half earthly heritage. His tools of sharpened stones are the only tools produced deliberately by any animal that lasted through the ages. Wallace knew about these tools and knew they were muted evidence that years ago somewhere mankind had undergone some change that forever set him aside from other animals. Wallace knew that man was not the result of evolution alone, but if he guessed the truth as to the probability of hybrid humans, he dared not voice it. There are many other voices that at times have pointed out the holes in evolutionary theory. Not so much in the case of other creatures, for whom the laws of natural selection and survival of the fittest seem to apply quite well, but most definitely in the case of the human species. At times, very peculiar fossils of the lower animals are found associated with ancient human and subhuman bones, as pointed out in an authoritative compendium of anthropology. In 1924, the Tongbaby child species of Australopithecus africanus. So the I'm not going to say it right. Australopithecus. I'm not even going to bother. Everyone knows what it is. Was unearthed by anatomist Raymond Dart of Johannesburg, South Africa, and later examined by Robert Broom, a South African anthropologist. Animal fossils were also found around the ape-man child's bones, no less than 15 different creatures. I bet you this has been, I think this has been disproven, isn't it? Anyways. The appearance, what do we say, which is and associated with the Australopithecus thing. I'm going to look it up so I don't have to keep butchering it. I've heard it 1,000 times from everybody. I can't say it now. Fuck. Okay. Australopithecus, right? Africanus. Just make sure I say it right.
Australopithecus.
So fuck, I can't say it.
Australopithecus.
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 And then there'd be the Australopithecine skeletons, or fossil bones of several hundred extinct animals new to paleontology. I can't read. I just can't. I'm not going to give up though, because this is not just for entertainment or entertaining people. This is for to deal with my MS, my dyslexia, and to know the truth. And there's multiple reasons for it. I'm going to fight regardless. So I'm not interested in what people think of me. It's too late to do anything about it anyways. The appearance of the great groups of unknown fossils centered around and near subhuman bones has a peculiar ring to it, almost as if the Starman were bringing new species from their world and introducing them on Earth in order to give early man more game to hunt. Or perhaps the species are mute and startling evidence of certain hibernizing experiments among lower animals that were carried on by starmen biologists. It doesn't have to be starmen. Later, we will give more attention to this distinct possibility. I mean, why can't it be something interdimensional? Why can't it be something that crawls out of the freaking abyss? Why, you know what I mean? We can't say all those things. In other words, why can't we say we don't have clue where our creators come from? That would be a good start. In the book that attempts to present a sweeping and I hope they prove what I'm saying. I hope they prove to me I'm wrong. Overall picture that what the cosmos is all about. The question is asked, granting the truth of evolution's qualitative development here on Earth. What about evolution's qualitative development? These periodical appearances of new genera and new species or even new varieties in these species so radically different as to cause science unable to account for their source, to call them mutations. The author goes on to state that we know only half of evolution, and that mutations into unexplained species must come from special place beyond Earth life. A noted biologist first points out that the elephant or the buffalo, when trying to escape a hunter, will canningly go upwind, while the rhino may blunder downwind in panic. He then states, if Darwin is right, which I don't believe, nor do not believe, that only the fittest survive, it is a miracle that this prehistoric idiot, the rhino, exists. Unless by fitness Darwin means the only physical fitness, which is absurd. Biologists go on to affirm that he staunchly supports the whole notion of evolution as being a natural process, but, quote, I could name hundreds of species that don't appear to be fit for anything, end quote. He is obliquely referring to the idea that survival of the fittest. He concludes, quote, maybe they evolved by natural selection, but the point is, how have they managed to survive? Natural selection and survival of the fittest concept are both sore points among various evolutionists factions, since they are hard to put to account for sudden strange mutations that thumb their nose at the orderly progressions of classic evolution. Biologists today often create their own mutations among fruit flies and guinea pigs in general in laboratories, where mutations are the long sweep of evolution also created in the laboratories of starmen. Say this because where mutations in the long sweep of evolution also created in the laboratories of starmen? Question mark. And was their most notable mutation Homo sapiens, the creature with superior intelligence beyond the scope of natural selection or survival of the fittest as it applies on Earth. Gunther Rosenberg, scholar and researcher into human origins, states that, quote, man is a unique animal. He stands out like a sore thumb when comparisons are made with his cousins, the apes. The differences are more numerous than the similarities. Darwin's theory of evolution is simply unproven. End quote. This doubt seems to be shared by many or by other scientists. Vernon L. Gross, that's not Rose, it's Gross, right? A physicist recently remarked that, quote, creation and evolutionary theories are not necessarily mutual exclusives. Some of the scientific data may best be explained by a certain theory, while other data substantiate a process of evolution. End quote. As we noted before, that the California Board of Education decided that the biblical creation story of man's origin would have equal priority with evolution theory in shades of Tennessee Scopes trial. But obviously, much more enlightened investigation and evaluation went into the decision to demote the evolutionary theory, but it could only lamely explain the origin of man, and therefore to place it on the equal terms alongside with old standby of the biblical creation. However, this sharing of theories to explain a single phenomenon hardly constitutes an advance in solving the mystery and leaves it more unexplained than ever. It means that a single all-embracing theory remains to be found. That single all-embracing concept in all its pristine simplicity is what this book hopes to supply. We might say that even if Darwin's theory wins out in scientific minds against the vagaries of divine creation, it still cannot complete, we believe, with the sheer logic of hybrid man's creation by starmen, or something else. It doesn't have to be starmen. I just wish they would stop saying the starman. In the following chapter, we will try to solidify this homo hybrid concept as fully as possible in the scientific way. And the need for a new theory to supplant the evolution theory, but for man only, not animals, is highly apparent for the following quotes. An authoritative book on primates candidly admits that, unfortunately, the early stages of man's evolutionary progress along his own individual line remains a total mystery. Another paleoanthropological work states forthrightly as follows, and I'll talk words. Man is not just another species of animal. He is the first in the history of the world who at last understands something of his place in it and of the laws that govern his own activities here. The voice of an esteemed Soviet anthropologist adds to the chorus, quote, some scientists maintain that our planet is not old enough for intelligent beings to have spontaneously developed on it, from the protozoans to the present-day species of man. End quote. Most significant of all is a quotation from a recent book, exploring the relationship between mythology and man's origin. Quote, man's alleged ascension from anthropod to man being remains unproven simply because of the famed, quote, missing link, end quote, is so elusive. Sober scientists have declared that the bones of this ape human will never be found because they simply do not exist. The missing link could have been a shipload of space travelers from another world, end quote. Starman as the missing link of man's baffling evolutionary history, despite its rather romantic flavor and with little factual data to back it up. No other statements could be. Damn, I'm having a hard time. And no other statements could express so briefly and succinctly what this book is about, and will attempt to prove viable in a scientific way. So that's the end of chapter 1. That is brutal. Sorry about the brutality of it, but small print, small book, kind of, but it's an important argument in my. I don't agree with the Starman thing. It doesn't have to be Starman, right? It could be Waterman. It could be something under us. It could be something inside the world. It could be something inside the trees. It could be inside something else. There could be dimensions running along, right? Those, windows, if you will, portals that come in and out. And then instead of it being stars, we're talking about interdimensional beings, an interdimensional man. So it's important to. I understand where they're coming from, because they're still trying to hold on to the solely the physical side of things, right? But there's more to it in life than that, so they know that as well. Damn, it's gonna be another cold day. I gotta go shopping. I got no food. I got my son this weekend. Literally I got like half a. I got a quarter. I got some hamburger. That's about it.
You're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.
Seasons don't change.